Join Lee Bellinger today on the Bellinger Report. Lee is the publisher of Off-Grid Confidential, one of the last information financial newsletters to be delivered 100% through the mail and completely independent of the internet and big tech scolds. Lee has been publishing continuously since 1988 and is your guide to off-grid living.
This is Lee Bellinger with the Bellinger Report, and this morning I'm talking to Eric Kramer, and we're going to talk about a really important subject that has been on my mind a bit, which is, are we in a potential political realignment? These happen very, very rarely, but we're in a situation where basically the state has grown, for the most part, uninterrupted for a steady, long period, pretty much since Abraham Lincoln was president. And the Civil War was a big inflection point, and that would have been, I would consider that to be a realignment. And later on in U.S. history, I think FDR was a realignment president, and Lyndon Baines Johnson, in particular, was helped to refocus the alignment against the forces of liberty. And now the decrepit state is falling apart. Political correctness is coming under fire for the first time ever. And we're seeing a lot of, not just polls, but a lot of examples of individuals are starting to push back against the state. I'm going to talk about that a little bit with you, Eric. So I just want to make a general statement that I think that in future historians may well see Joe Biden as the father of the modern pro-liberty movement, because as president, he's so witless that he's not reining in the crazy leftists who are simply doubling down and tripling down on all the mistakes. And he doesn't appear to have the mental wherewithal to rein them in like Obama would have done and like Clinton would have done. They all support the same goals, but they're very careful about not upsetting the natives of the United States. And what I find interesting and encouraging is that while I'm an old political hack, and of course I pay attention to how evil the left actually are, but what's far more important than me or you noticing, Eric, is that the general public is feeling it, because there's nobody in the White House. Normally, a leftist president like Biden would rein in the people who are doing crazy things in his name, and he's not stopping them. He's sending the sick in the FBI on people who are challenging, political correctness in school and in left-wing indoctrination in schools, and they're making all kinds of obvious mistakes. And the media is just following him over a cliff. And so there's a huge opportunity for realignment for pro-liberty Americans that we have not seen really in our lifetime. And it's, we did have a brief period with Ronald Reagan. He was the first president to have a narrative, the Republican president. But most Republican presidents don't have a pro-liberty narrative like Reagan did. And Trump had a pro-liberty narrative. There have only been two U.S. presidents that I'm aware of that actually had a pro-liberty narrative in modern history. That's remarkable if you consider it. And that's why one of the reasons why Trump was such a threat. And obviously they're terrified of Trump, or they wouldn't be doing this January 6th business the way they're doing it, trying to change the subject. So Eric, let's get down and talk about this a little bit, because I think I've got a number of examples that I've seen that suggest to me that the entire American populace is waking up. And, the dramatic change in Hispanic vote, which you caught on. I've mentioned this on the show before, Eric, you caught on early on to Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader, when he took power, kept talking about Puerto Rican statehood, and he dropped that like a hot rock, because when they looked at all the pro-Trump polling in Puerto Rico, I guess they decided that wasn't so great, that Puerto Rico would not be one of they just dropped the talk of statehood for Puerto Rico. And, it looks, if the trends continue, we're going to, they may have flooded the country with Hispanics, but it turns out that the Hispanics are harder working on, they're masters of micro businesses, and they've continued to work. They continue to work, and they don't like the left-wing indoctrination, and they seem to self-identify with Caucasians. So, if they're forced, they don't like all this leftist stuff. So the fact is that the Democrats have spent years, decades, bringing Hispanics into the country, and now the Hispanics are not following the script that the Democrats thought that they were going to follow. That we're talking about the probability, because under Trump, I think Trump pulled down 38%, which is huge. in 2016, and he was up another 4 points in 2020. And now the numbers are showing a virtual collapse in support, Hispanic support. So we're almost at parity on the Hispanic vote. So that open border strategy may well have been futile politically for the Democrats. It's not going to pay the dividends that they expected when Teddy Kennedy opened up this can of worms, which was, one of the things that immigration patterns followed before Kennedy was that they wanted to keep the population racially roughly the same. And Kennedy broke that mold. But it turns out that the Hispanics are hardworking, very hardworking people, and they've taken to the American system like a duck to water, in many cases better than the Caucasians have. So I think the politics are starting to catch up. Politics take time to catch up to reality. So,
if you look at the polls for Hispanics, even Hispanics, the problem isn't Hispanics. We tend to focus on that ethnic group because that's what the Democrats want us to do. When you poll Hispanics, the ones that are already here, they're against all this illegal immigration. Now, here's the thing. If you look at Hispanics as a whole, it's not a surprise that they are exactly the way you said. First of all, they're God-fearing people. Which the Democrats aren't. God-fearing people, which sides with us on the right, conservatism, religiosity, if that's what you want to call it. But another thing, if it wasn't for the illegal immigration, the Hispanics are like the poster children for what our country, was founded. They're hard workers. You watch those people work, you watch the dedication that they have to their craft and everything. They're just like the Irish when they came here. It's just how it is. Another thing, besides the religious aspect, which is, that's a monkey wrench for the Democrats and the progressives, especially, not Democrats. It's for the progressive liberals. But, the other thing with them, think about it. They're leaving communist and socialist countries for a reason, because there's too much crime, because they don't like the aspects of socialism. They're not coming here to be socialists. So the Democrats have always said, oh, let's just look at the Cubans. They're like some weird group. But no, the Cubans are also reflective of what Hispanics are. Hardworking, religious, God-fearing people. On top of it, they have the conservative values because of their faith and their religion, their hard work ethic. And then on top of it, they're fleeing Castro. The Hispanics is definitely, one of the things I do, I work in a nonprofit and work with the poor. And one of the things I say all the time, it's real easy to pick on a group of people, whether they're Hispanic or poor or Black. And when they're doing things, we get upset and we stereotype them. The reason Hispanics are coming over here in droves illegally is because the system allows them. We have opened the border. If we were in the same position, we would be leaving the places they're coming from to make a better life for our kids. So I always say when I'm working with poor people, as long as people aren't really, as long as they're not doing things intentionally that is against the system, but if the system allows you to get certain benefits, if you get them, it's the system's fault. That's our problem. We've had a total collapse of the system. And hey, one of the great things about that, I know you've heard this, Lee, even Ted Cruz this past week, of course he blundered on one thing, but he did come out he talked about, impeaching Biden. Well, the one thing they really can impeach Biden on, and people are saying this is what they will probably impeach him on if they do, is his complete failure at the border. That's in his job duty to maintain the border, to maintain the laws. So, Biden's destroyed us.
Well, I'm not a big fan of the idea of impeaching Biden. I think it really is high crimes and misdemeanors, and the policy issues that are so terrible, that really ultimately rests with the voters. And also, I don't want to follow the path that the Democrats have taken on impeaching somebody because you don't like their politics. It really needs to be something along the lines of what the Constitution specifies, even though the SOB deserves to be impeached. But I don't think we want to impeach this guy. He's you got to look at the alternative, who the Veep would be. And he's, at least with Biden, he's not reining in leftists. They're running all over him, and they're making big mistakes in his name that are lasting mistakes. First of all, by sending the FBI after parents. Finally, we now have a scenario where the Republicans are actually going to use the education story to go after them, which they haven't been doing for decades. You know, that public education, the coronavirus, the overstepping of authority, the abuse of trust, and how the left have seized upon Corona to try to destroy the private economy, to destroy small businesses, and wreck the private, and then make children wear all these masks and all this ridiculous nonsense in the school systems. And so it's blown up in their face. And now Republicans have a new cultural issue that's really powerful that we should have been using for decades, but they finally got around to it. This wouldn't have happened. So now we've got permanent pushback on these public education systems that desperately need to be fixed. So you're seeing a lot more things going on, including in state legislatures. Now Republicans are paying attention to voting, to the integrity of the voting process. And that's why I think we won in Virginia. I think last time we talked, I might have mentioned that just before the Republican victory, the triple crown victory for the Republicans in Virginia, you know, forgive me, but I do read the New York Times and the Washington Post. And both of those papers about a week before were complaining about, my God, Republicans are interested in sending in poll watchers now. Oh, my God. And they've actually got attorneys so they can get injunctions, and they're not being cowed by accusations of racism. And that's really the biggest thing that's collapsing on the left now, is the overuse of bashing people for being white and bashing people, with this McCarthyistic approach, saying that they silence their opponents by saying that they're racist, and everybody just cowers before it with the media. But see, now let me give you an example of this. Do you remember an old television show? Are you old enough to remember an old television show called The Dukes of Hazzard, where you got two rednecks riding around in a 69 Dodge Charger with a Confederate flag on the roof? Yep. Okay, well, you look kind of like you might even be one.
Bo and Daisy.
Bo and Daisy, yes, you can't forget them.
Yep.
So the cancel culture recently went against the Dukes of Hazzard. They didn't want them running in reruns anymore. And John Schneider, one of the actors, he's now 61, and he stood up and said, stop branding people as racist. We're not going to, and basically he gave them pushback that would not have happened before. And he said, I'm looking forward to the day when the wind comes out of all this nonsense concerning suppression of free speech and freedom of expression. When you start seeing things like that happen, you know that something big is afoot. And I would argue that the Let's Go Brandon phenomenon is very interesting to me because it's been talked about a lot, but I think it's the result of 100 million people having their views suppressed in online social media just because they're pro-liberty. And Let's Go Brandon is a way of bypassing the official censors or the unofficial censors. And what's interesting is Brandon himself was at first kind of afraid to embrace this. Now he's accepting Let's Go Brandon sponsors on his car. That should tell you something right there. That's huge. Normally, he would run and hide under the cover when ESPN goes after him, but the left have made such a big mistake invading sports. And this is the sports, at least some segments of the sports agenda, the people who pay attention to sports, at least with the car racing, are actually saying no to this. And to a point where Brandon decided that it was in his interest to put Let's Go Brandon on his car, which at first he was walking away from it and afraid. But I think that when he realized that his fan base loved him for it, he decided to roll with it, and as it were. So that's huge. That's really huge that has happened in this case.
Well, the great thing about the Biden administration, like you said, the Biden administration and the left who's, propping them up, it's like they're like the gift that never, quits giving. It's mistake after mistake after mistake. Talking about the teachers, well, not the teachers, but actually the parents fighting the CRT in the school system. That's a huge mistake. I didn't read the article, but they said the left is finally, the title today was, the left's finally realizing, the problem they have there. Yeah, because what they've done, let's look at Trump, for instance. When he ran, one of the reasons he lost was he infuriated women. I mean, because of his personality and the way he dealt with things and the way he talked to people and the way he shamed people. And that's one of the things that cost him the vote. or he would have been president. Well, guess what? This is the bigger deal than just Trump's personality, because when you mess with women's children, mothers, you're in trouble. And, they are changing their vote because that's the most important thing to women is their children. And it's not just a matter of changing their vote in a political alignment. What that's going to cause is now you've got people awoke to the fact that we need to get our kids out of these public school systems or we need to fix them. That's been the training grounds for, the left. And now the left, they overplayed big and they're going to lose that training ground now.
By the way, Eric, there's a movement afoot now to require that people who run for school boards declare themselves to be Republicans or Democrats, because these apartisan ballots allow left-wing nuts to get into the system without being identified.
Right.
So I think these types of ideas that are coming from the bottom up in the United States, especially through the state legislatures, is so important. And we're seeing that on many, many levels. We're saying, hey, we are going to pay attention to how the ballots are counted. We're not going to be cowed by being accused of racist. We're not going to send in political hacks anymore to look after our interest on election night. We're actually going to have people who are seriously watching this stuff. And this is what happens when they overplay their hand, and there's nobody stopping the left from doing what they're doing. They're just continuing to double and triple and quadruple down to a point where you've got AOC partying with her friends for her birthday in Miami without a mask, because she goes to a pro-liberty state that doesn't force people to wear masks to go party in Miami. Isn't that? And you got to love that. And it just continues and continues and continues. And
it's to be expected of her. I mean, her highest level of achievement in life was she was a barista. I mean, come on, she's not that smart of a person. Just like when she wore, the dress that she wore to the big gala, what did it have on it? It looked like the writing that at Chick-fil-A. Oh, tax the rich. She had that on that white dress. Meanwhile, it cost $35,000 a plate to be there. So she had to pay
AOC is pretty smart too. She wouldn't be where she was if she was dumb, but she does follow a toxic ideological narrative that's quite destructive, that is still very destructive in our country. But what's nice is the mask has come off this face so that people can actually see. And here's something else that's really important. For all of Trump's mistakes, we have something kind of rare in politics where he fought and won for major changes in policy that are so profound. The first time regulation had ever been cut, the first time where we made our corporate tax structure competitive, a general pro-business environment, a willingness to say no to the Chinese sucking the life out of our country. Not that it was their fault. They were just taking advantage of our stupidity, decades and decades of bipartisan stupidity. And then when Biden came in, all of his handlers, and it was showing success, lots of success. And now that Biden is in, you're getting a rare comparison in very short order, in about 10 or 11 months after Biden came in and undid everything Trump did, energy independence, regulatory, everything. The economy goes to crap. The border is wide open. 2 or 3 million people have been snuck into the country in various cities who are unvaccinated, starts up all this coronavirus all over again. And then he's saying the solution is for us to wear masks and to, mandates and all this other stuff. The public has had an opportunity to see in a very short time frame, inside of a 2-year time frame, what it's the difference between leftists running the show, Trump running the show, and then leftists restoring what Trump had fixed. And so people get a chance. It's very rare in politics to have that kind of accountability. Usually it's the positive effects of like Reaganomics. When Clinton finally became president, all the supply side stuff that Reagan had done had finally come to the front. And plus Clinton had a peace dividend. He had a lot of extra money because the Soviet Union had fallen. So the United States actually achieved a balanced budget under Clinton, but it is what had happened during Reagan's period, but Clinton got the benefits of it. But in this case, you had A and then you had B. You had Clinton, you had Trump with a big success, very successful economy, pro working class people. And then suddenly you get, Biden coming in and they trashed all that. And it is clearly being perceived as an assault on the working class people of this country. And that is what's beautiful about this. So, yes, I can't stand the Biden people, but the truth is they're doing us a big favor, as long as they don't get us into some kind of a war, which is a real possibility. But the country needed a kick in the ass and a wake up call. And And, like I said, you and I are a couple of old political hacks and we pay attention to this stuff. But when people are starting to see it in every aspect of their lives, that's the potential for realignment. And I think that they've so overplayed the race card and so overplayed these other issues that people are starting to say, okay, fine, we're just not listening to you anymore. We're not listening. And I think that the Let's Go Brandon thing is very encouraging because it's kind of like, it was like that in Chile. During the Cold War, we supported Pinochet, who was by anybody's standard a dictator. He was a pro-U.S. dictator. He was one of our, but he really was quite, he was quite brutal at killing his opposition. And he controlled all the newspapers and the television stations. And so, but he didn't think to control the arts. And so theaters became a mechanism of expression against him that was actually in the long run more effective than anything else. And that's where Let's Go Brandon is all about, because that's from the bottom up. That's a situation where, they were saying, to Joe Biden, and the public has picked up on this without anybody orchestrating it. This is from the bottom up. And it's like, it's a twofer because it mocks NBC Sports for trying to cover something up with their left-wing crap. And it also sends a message to big tech and the censors. And when you start seeing things like Let's Go Brandon, that's actually, and it's funny. It's funny and it's respectful to the president more so than the original sayings that were being said in the stadiums. And it's something that everybody's in on. And, I don't know the biblical saying that the devil, that proud soul, cannot bear to be mocked. Humor is the most effective weapon against the left. And Let's Go Brandon is a beautiful example of that scenario. And so like in Chile, where, the people found their own avenues of expression despite the official censorship, that's now happened in the United States. It's a big deal. It's not some slogan the RNC came up with. It was a direct, that tells you that the country is primed for real leadership against the left. And so I think that if we can find whoever runs for president humor is a very powerful tool. And these are people that take themselves with extreme seriousness at all times. So that's their weakness and that's their vulnerability.
When you talk about this realignment, we talked about, you saw how U-Haul has run out of trucks in California. I mean, because the people are headed in mass waves to Texas. So in relation to that story, what do you think about I think it was Marjorie Taylor Greene? She got a bunch of flack because, she's like, yeah, come on to our state. That's great. But she's advocating a cooling period, like 3 to 5 years once you move there before you can vote. Because, what we don't want is in these states. We don't want our red states to turn blue because these idiots are leaving their failed states and coming to vote the same way that they voted and put the same kind of idiots in office. Like I just saw today, Facebook is putting a major, I think they're looking at, I don't know if it's their headquarters, but they're moving to Austin. It just changes everything. Well, so what do you think about Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Look at it this way. Amazon, Amazon, and is it Amazon or is it Google? But their own employees are getting ready to form a union.
I think it's an Amazon plant.
And if that happens, that means that the powers that be that control it are going to be displaced, but probably with more even crazy leftists. And, we could end up under the hands of, of a unionized private economy that through the back door that way. So, there are some dangers out there, but on the whole, I'm pretty optimistic. Let me put it to you another way. Many moons ago when I went to Hillsdale College, one of the most, and this is about the Soviet Union, was seen as an invincible rising power for many, many decades. And when I was at Hillsdale, one of the most popular books out there was a book called Why Democracies Perish. And the whole premise of the book was, and this was all conservatives read the darn book at the time. All the anti-communist people read the book at that time, because everybody basically accepted that we were slowly losing to the Soviet Union and they were an ascendant nuclear armed power. And when Reagan came in, he not only did he have a peace through strength policy, but he was the first president to actually challenge the regime from the moral high ground. He said without hesitation, the U.S. was a beacon of freedom and best hope of mankind. And that, coupled with smart diplomacy, led to the downfall. So really, we're only one president away from carefully and adeptly handling the left. Like I said, Trump is the first president to take on domestic political correctness. And remember, the political correctness started in the college campuses, and everybody thought it was weird, cute, and funny. But it has morphed into a national imperative now that blocks millions of people from talking about pro-liberty issues online. And so they're vulnerable now. If we start to talk in our own ways about the pro-liberty stuff, they're vulnerable. They have overplayed their hand. The left was successful in neutering the police departments all over the country, and the results are coming in, and you're seeing even left-wing mayors reversing their positions on these issues, and they own the issues. They own all the bad issues now, all of them. So I think that it isn't just at the ballot box where we have to defeat them. It's people who are starting to advertise their businesses as pro-liberty businesses. We are a pro-liberty business. And it's like all the restaurants are banding together now against the people who are doing these order your food app people. And they're now doing advertisements saying, we're buying our own coupons for our competitors because these apps are just middlemen and they're sucking up the money from the working class people. And so you're seeing the kind of pushback that we have never really seen in our lifetime, Eric. And the more that witless Joe Biden can't rein in the leftist loonies, the better. I do think that the Pentagon establishment does a lot more is taking into account that Biden is weaker on foreign policy. So there are more people in an institutional position to make sure that we don't make too many mistakes vis-a-vis Russia. And that may not be enough in the end. They may be tempted to strike, but that's not what we're talking about today. I'm just saying that nobody is protecting Biden from himself on the economy, on the assault on liberties, because so much is being done in his name and he has no clue what's going on. And there's nobody there to turn off the switch. And the voters are going to turn off the switch. By this time next year, the voters will have turned off that switch and he'll become relatively harmless. But that's going to be the worst of all worlds for them, because you're talking about 36 more months of this going on. And by the time we get to the next presidential election, we'll have a super majority. You're going to have basically what's happened is the pro-liberty movement has become the workers' party, the true working people party, because they're affected by $1.50 a cent gas, higher prices and everything else. We were exporting energy. There were huge jobs going out there. And when these morons, these ninnies closed all that down, the leftists had no idea what they were doing. And now it just took a very short amount of time, 10, 11 months before voters could see for themselves what was going on.
Well, hey, the clock is ticking, man. 11 months? And Dick Morris on the right and many people on the left now the left is panicking. Dick Morris made a prediction this week that you're going to see 60 to 80 seats, because of the way the polling is and the backlash against the left and their policies switch. The great thing about that is even with redistricting, because the Republicans control the state houses, the 5 seats that were down, they're saying that we're going to get more seats through redistricting. We'll take over the House just through that if nothing else happens. But they're looking at 60 to 80 seats in the House that we're going to pick up. Dick Morris even said 5 seats in the Senate. So those kind of changes are huge. But
Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader in the House, one of the things that made him so successful in the last election, remember they were counting on 25 net gain in the House, and they ended up coming to within 5 seats of losing the House. And what McCarthy had done was he looked at every single possible district and learned everything there was to know about those districts. And they designed a campaign to oust those Democrats, and it was very effective. And he's doing exactly the same thing now. So, these will be, not only do we have a lot of other factors that we've already discussed on our side, but he's going to have a precision political attack aimed. He's not just counting on the aggregate working for us. He's getting down into details. And I think that's a really exciting idea, especially on developing new campaign strategies and talking points on schools and talking to moms and working moms and parents and all. So, finally, public school unionism has been put on the radar screen. It's about time. So a lot of very powerful ideas are coming to the fore. And I think, too, that you're going to see far more businesses promoting the pro-liberty banner because it's going to be good business going forward for a long time. So,
well, I was listening to Dan Bongino this past week, and he was saying on his show, the movement on what's happening in the business world is far exceeding what anybody thought. He said, the left thought that we were all just a bunch of rednecks, a bunch of dumbos, and they're freaking out. Bongino was talking about, and he's in the background of a lot of it also, yes. But he said basically we've had billions of dollars put into replacing, or not replacing, but creating this separate infrastructure that'll be pro-liberty and be conservative. One of the things we'll do, though, is we'll keep the tenets of what that means, and we're going to give a voice to the left, which they won't do to us. But I was amazed. He talked about, they didn't think it could be done, but they've already got the groundwork completed to completely have our own internet. Won't even have to
Absolutely.
Use the other one. I mean, and he said right now, another thing he'll be announcing soon, payment services, where, we're going to have pro-liberty payment services so we can avoid being canceled by the banks and by the credit card companies, because that's a huge thing going forward. The ESG ratings that they're using, they're going to use those to give people loans. They're going to, basically they're going to use them not to give loans is what they're going to do. They're going to use it, to hurt our businesses, to hurt any of our thought production or anything. So, it's just amazing what's going on in that realm. Actually, for people that are, business people, entrepreneurial spirits, it's a great time to be alive because it's creating it's like recreating the economy. And
by the way,
you're getting an opportunity at the ground level, to look at what's successful in the current economy. Now let's duplicate it, but let's, do it the way it has always been done. I mean, so it's a huge opportunity for people.
That's right. So, Eric, you and I were in the dark days after the 2020 election. You and I were speculating that a lot of this would happen, and it's extremely gratifying that it's starting to come to. But you know what? Here, the whole linchpin of this is Joe Biden is not reining in his leftist because he's a witless drone. That's what's going on, and so they're continuing to push. So, and one other good thing, we don't have 11 months to wait. In 3 or 4 months, the races will be so politicized that they won't be able to pass any legislation. I don't think they're going to be able to pass anything anyway that's too bad between now and November. I think that they're not going to be able to do it. So, there comes a point where we're almost at the point now where the election is so close that the Democrats are going to balk at passing anything big. So we're, in a manner of speaking, we're home free. But see, now the public is getting, in the meantime, they're not going to be able to do any much more harm than they've already done. And all this is going to continue to deepen. Now, we now have evidence. There's new evidence that that there's a spiral. What's it called? The wage price spiral. Now that's starting. So once the wage price spiral starts, that's bad news. That's bad news on the inflationary front. It's going to get a lot of attention. A lot of people are sick. You're going to see more disruptions in food supply and a lot of other issues. And because they're paying people to stay home and play video games. On top of that, they let millions of people into the country who are unvaccinated, and they made all the rest of us sick. And now we're all sick again. I just got over a cold myself. And so, you're going to continue to see big problems. And obviously, Joe Biden is not in a position to rein in his leftist or put anybody in. And he's just going to continue to the media is going to keep applauding him like he's actually a real president. So this is a good time for liberty. And, let people feel the pain. They need to see it because we're political hacks. The founding fathers did not want Americans to be political. They wanted people to focus on business. And, and frankly, too many smart, bright, conservative people are so caught up with sports that they're not paying attention to what actually matters. And they're not taking ownership of their country. And we need to get these people from maybe watch a few less football games and maybe start paying attention to be taking ownership of their country. And I think if that can continue to build as a movement among the broader population, so they can come in and they need to do a primordial scream at these people to tell them to stop what they're doing. And I think that, if you get 60, 70, 80, 90 gain seats in the House, That's not a crazy projection. And guess what? And it's not a crazy idea at all. That would lock in a congressional majority for many, many decades. It could, or at least a decade or more. So, the system works. There's assistance of resistance. Maybe we lucked out that Joe Biden was there, that he's so witless and he can't rein in the left. Maybe we're lucky that way. I mean, I know it's a crazy way of looking at it, but Obama would have reined that crap in. Obama was much smarter about reining in extremists. I mean, he was an extremist himself, but he was very good at not letting the crazies in the party take the lead the way they're doing now, because they're scaring people.
Yeah.
And by the way, the damage is already done. They've done so much damage that the problems are going to continue to intensify. But frankly, let me tell you what's good about it is that businesses are going to adapt. Businesses are adaptive. Unlike government, they're going to adapt. They're going to adapt to having a smaller workforce. They're going to automate where necessary. And businesses they're going to do their own supply chain changes. They're going to be more motivated to do that now. They're going to fix that junk. We might see a lot of shipping rerouted to Florida and Texas ports, and a lot more, this country is a very adaptive country. People forget that about this country. We're way more adaptive. And, people couldn't get the COVID tests because Biden couldn't provide them. Guess what? They're just going about their business. And I think that they're going to stop listening to them. And that actually, you're seeing evidence of that. So we just keep looking at the tea leaves and tugging on that. You and I do watch these things very closely. And I see a lot of from the bottom up. That's the secret, Eric. It's all about what happens from the bottom up. Notice that we barely mentioned Republican Party. We're not talking about the Republican Party here. We're talking about a genuine, peaceful revolt in the making from the ground up. That's where it's got to happen from.
Yeah. Hey, I read a book recently. I want to put a plug in for it, if it's okay. This book, basically, it's an amazing book. It's Do What You Believe, or You Won't Be Free to Believe It Much Longer by Steve Deace.
Yes.
But it's fantastic because what it does is the basic premise of the book is that over 40 years ago was the last Christian manifesto, which gave us a vision for religious believers to wage a culture war. And we've gotten so far away from that. In fact, the book points out it's going to be the church that's going to fix the problem, but we have to stand up. And so basically it's time for a new generation to arise and answer history's call in our time. But it's great because it gives you the history of what's happened, how we got here. More importantly, what do we got to do? And it gives actual steps on what we got to do to make that difference and make that change. But it's a great book for anybody that, do what you believe, or you won't be free to believe it much longer. That's where we are. And I just end with, I like Lee. I'm glad the Republicans are looking the way they are. We haven't talked about them, but at the end of the day, we do have a two-party structure, and we, the people, have to stand up now and hold the Republicans accountable. It's not about winning 60 to 80 seats. It's not about winning 5 senators if they're going to do the same thing they always do. I mean, what we really need to be pushing is for them to create a contract with us, a contract just like Newt Gingrich did, contract for America, and then hold them accountable, because otherwise these people, they'll sit around and won't do half of anything. You know what? 4 years later, we'll be in the same situation. We'll lose seats and blah, blah, blah. If we're going to change this country forever,
I don't think that's going to happen.
We really got it.
I don't think that's going to happen, because as long as Biden is in control, people are going to, these dynamics that we're talking about, but there's nobody in position to reverse these policies in a way that it's going to, this is the Titanic hit. And it might still look like it's stable and floating. A lot of people didn't leave on the lifeboats at the early hours, in the first hour that they'd struck the berg. Nobody wanted to leave the warm big Titanic to get in a cold Atlantic Ocean in a lifeboat. So the damage has been done. And really, I know that the Biden people have made a few small adjustments. They opened the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to try to moderate the prices of gasoline a little bit. They've re-engaged with Mexico a little bit to reenact some of the cooperation protocols that Trump had established on reducing the border stuff. But frankly, unless somebody came in and undid everything Biden has done, or the leftists have done in Biden's name, it's going to continue to get worse. But the truth is, this economy is set for a massive boom. and innovative boom like the likes of which we've never seen or imagined. I'm very optimistic and bullish about the American future because finally enough pieces have come into alignment. The arc of political correctness is slowly dying, is slowly collapsing. These are really important big developments. And, they've so overused their positions of authority, like in the McCarthy era, that this is the new McCarthyism. Racism is the new McCarthyism in this country. And it's going to fail just like McCarthyism ultimately failed. You're a communist. I'm destroying your career. You got the Dukes of Hazzard guys saying no to that and being backed up by the public. And you got the Let's Go Brandon, who basically was embarrassed by politically because he didn't know anything about politics. So all of a sudden his name is Let's Go Brandon. And then he looks around and he goes, oh my God, I'm going to accept this on my car. That tells you something big is happening. Yeah. Little things. It's the little unguarded things that tell you much more than the big things. The big things are what we see. The big things are what the media talk about. But when you look at the little pieces and how they fit, it's actually an excellent scenario for this country. Okay, so I think we've covered it for now, Eric. I appreciate your time this morning, and this is pretty exciting stuff. But let's keep working on this realignment. I'll work on finding some new additional examples, and I would invite you to do the same. And we will take this up again. I think this is a very important subject that, and people need hope right now. They need to know that this country has the potential to regenerate itself. And it does. It always has. So it's taken a lot of abuse, and the other side has been winning for a very long time. But I think that cycle can be broken. And I think it is. I think they're vulnerable. I think they're like Reagan. Everybody thought Reagan was a nut when he said the Soviet Union was vulnerable and could be defeated. Everybody all wanted to do arms control. He was the first guy that said these guys have a Mickey Mouse system and they're a joke. And that's what you need. People need to see it's a joke.
This is our first time back on this new year, so I'd like to wish everybody Happy New Year. But just kind of hold on to your underwear. It's not going to be a easy year. I think hopefully maybe by the end of the year we might see a little happiness. With COVID and everything else, it's not going to get better anytime soon. Also, inflation's going to get worse before it gets better. So those key things, and like you keep saying, hopefully we won't end up in a war. So it's not going to be necessarily a happy year, but we got some things to look forward to.
The war,
and I think
that's the one thing I would
create some really happy years in the future.
I agree, Eric. Thank you for your time today. And this is Lee Bellinger of the Bellinger Report signing off until next time.